Hello, good evening and welcome. This is the 153rd webinar series on the BASL webinar series, which started about 2 years ago. If you have been a part of us on the webinar series, which kicked off about 2 years ago, the BASL webinar series concluded about 150 webinars, starting in English language, going to Sinhala, Tamil, and in so many different areas. Now, in this webinar series also was targeted at as a part of the continuing legal education and continuing professional development project of the BASL. And towards after the 150th one, we thought we'll do a little bit of a change. And the first one of that change is coming to you live today. And this is called Beyond Court Practice. My first guest on this series is a very well-known person who has lived up to the word beyond court practice. He is a lawyer. He graduated as a lawyer, became an attorney at law. He's also a chartered insurer, is a qualified chartered insurer. And then he held jobs and positions in 3 different major areas, as you have seen from our intro. That's in the health, which is the latest, finance, and insurance. I'm introducing today, and my guest, like I said, is Deepthi Lukwarachi, CEO of Lanka Hospital Group. Deepthi, thank you very much for joining us, and good evening to you. I cannot hear you. You have to unmute.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
How are you today?
Fine, Chanakya.
Yes. Yes.
Very
now,
good. Yeah.
Good. Now, as you know, this is a different feel we want to give to our viewers, because this webinar series was done for the first time by any professional association in Sri Lanka and even abroad. There hadn't been 2-year webinar series to sync with the pandemic and to educate people. We want to ask you now, you graduated as a lawyer, as most of your contemporaries and people know, but people know you as a business person, finance, insurance, now in health. First, tell me, how did this happen? You graduated as a lawyer, and why did you think of going to something else?
Yeah, Chanakya. And then before I actually begin to talk, I need to first thank Rajiv, Chanakya, and the team at the Bar Association for inviting me to talk to you and also to talk to the young members about my life experience. And also, you know, what kind of motivation that I can offer to the people who are looking at alternative opportunities, and also the fact that to highlight the other opportunities which are available to young law graduates and attorneys. So with that, I can tell you, Chanakya, now I graduated in 1993, but you know, if you look at my CV, you will probably notice that I entered the law faculty in 1986, and then by the time that I graduated, it was 1993. So I was originally expected to graduate in 1989, but you probably will, people will recall, probably the youngsters may not recall, but people of our age will recall that there was a massive insurrection during that time.
I recall that too.
Yeah. So, yeah. So basically that actually resulted in prolonged closure of the universities. And then as a result, you know, the scheduled graduation actually occurred in 1993. So that was how I graduated in 1993, and it was actually a turbulent time, not all that racy, absolute political crisis and anarchy that was present there. So basically, I must tell you that the circumstances when I entered the law faculty, I had a very clear ambition and I had a very clear intent of becoming a lawyer and perhaps, you know, taking a very, very senior position in the legal profession or in the other aspects, maybe in the judiciary or some other area. But, you know, these circumstances actually intervened, and then as a result, I had to look out for an alternative opportunity because, you know, by that time I was almost 27 years, and then I had very little time to, you know, sacrifice. So how I came to the corporate sector was there was one of my good friends. He was actually a person he's a contemporary of mine who was in the commerce faculty, and he invited me and he told me that there is an opening at CTC Eagle Insurance. And CTC Eagle Insurance, he was actually while he was a graduate, he was working for CTC Eagle Insurance as a fund manager, and then that was the fund management arm of that company. So he felt that I was an ideal fit into the corporate sector. And by the time that we were just waiting at home, even at the final stages, we went through a massive striking process, and I was waiting to do the exams, and he wanted my CV. And then I came back to Colombo, and then I offered my CV to him. And finally, I was actually offered, the company was CTC Eagle Insurance, as direct subsidiary of Ceylon Tobacco, and then a company owned by the British American Industries Group. So I was taken in as a management trainee, and even at the point that I was taken in as a management trainee, I was still on a vacillating option whether to continue a career in the corporate sector, or embark on a career in the corporate sector, or else to go back to the legal profession. So I was actually hired as a result. And then because I was confidently able to face the interview, because my legal skills that I acquired, the advocacy skills, and then how to respond to questions, all that actually gave me a very solid background to face an interview. So having done that, I was actually chosen as a candidate as a management trainee, and I was put on a training program. So that's how I embarked on my career.
Right. Now, it's all started with insurance, as you said. Right, and this is something like accident from what I gather you were saying. So, as a lawyer, now one of the purpose of our doing this program is to instill and bring about knowledge of basically just because you pass out as a lawyer, right? You don't really have to be only in law. It is not only a practicing thing. It is a base qualification, and you can make your hay in other areas. You also got graduated on chartered insurance, if I may use the term, chartered insurance a course, right? It's something like a chartered insurer, like being an attorney or chartered accountant. So first of all, was it hands-on experience and the experiences were you getting from the field which you get into from CTC Eagle to others, or did you have to do those other qualifications for the purpose of being in that industry, or was it all voluntary?
Well, it so happened, Chanakya, because it happened this way. I think this is a very clear message to the youngsters as well.
Yeah.
When I actually started, because you discussed something about the law degree, but law degree in Sri Lanka is a first degree, but in many other countries, law degree actually is a second degree. In order for you to do a law degree, you need to have a primary degree as well.
Correct.
So basically, it's a very wide degree, and it actually offers life sciences in many respects. And basically, it looks like the word life sciences, I don't know whether it's the appropriate word that I use, but then the fact that it actually offers a whole gamut of, detailed skills, required to govern and then deal with complex issues in the society. So therefore, the law degree, law degree provided me a very solid foundation, and gave me the necessary background in order for me to meet any challenges that could have come on my way. So one experience that I could still recall is that I had two great bosses who were really my mentors. One was my managing director at that time, and then the director operations. So they actually saw something unique in me, and they always encouraged me to take two, because since I was a lawyer, and then since I was working in the insurance industry, they always encouraged me to take two chartered insurance, because they saw some potential in me. And one fine day, I still remember when I walked into the director operations office, he said that, Deepthi, you're just wasting your time. Why not take on chartered insurance? You're a brilliant guy, and you're able to actually contribute very well into the corporate sector, into the running of the business. So why not? Actually, it's not only your what you call ability to deal with issues and counteract issues and give solutions. If you're in this industry, you also need to, in order for you to gain acceptance, you also need to have professional qualifications in the area that I'm in. So even that I didn't take too seriously, because I think I was in my second year or in the third year, because I was able to by that time I was able to secure my position and consolidate my position. But there was a day I still recall, where in a big forum where all the accountants, the chartered insurers, and then all the actuaries all were present, there was some major complex issue that was actually concerning that company, and they were always finding there were various theories, and it was being articulated by very many people, an absolute and intellectual discussion. So I grasped everything, and actually I articulated, analyzed step by step. I offered the protection, offered a solution, and then finally, since it was so systematic and analytical, the senior management, the managing director and the director operations, as well as the other senior managers, had to accept the proposition that I advocated. So, after the meeting, when I walked out of the meeting, because I having established that, when I walked out of the meeting, the senior general manager who was actually challenged on that matter by me, when I was actually just a 2 or 3 year management trainee, not a management trainee, by that time I was an assistant manager, he told me the same thing. He said, Deepthi, you may be very knowledgeable, you may be very articulate, you may be very rational in what you offered, but for you to have this acceptance, right, your viewpoint would have been much more decorated if you were a chartered insurer. So it was actually that challenge I took upon myself, and I thought to myself that within 2 years that I will acquire this qualification. So taking that, it was actually another very cumbersome exercise doing chartered insurance while working. And at that time I was married too. So I took it upon, and I actually qualified as a chartered insurer. It's actually an advanced diploma in insurance offered by the Chartered Insurance Institute of UK. So while working, I did that, and then became a chartered insurer with my post qualifying experience. So that's how I became a chartered insurer. But the message that I want to convey to the youngsters is that if you opt to take into a discipline, and because the commercial sector is so diverse today, the industry is so large, not necessarily the banking and the finance industry. You have the leasing industry. You have various industries that are actually contributing to the well-being of the Sri Lankan economy, the export economy, import aspects. But if you select a profession, or if you select a career in a different in one of the identified areas, you need to pursue the qualification that's relevant to that area, because your law degree will give you a wider spectrum, of wider understanding, wider ability to apply your theories into practice. That comfort you will have, but at the same time, I think you will also have to understand the sciences of the trade that you are in. So this is my message to the youngsters. So it's very important that you take a few more years, because by the time you graduate as an attorney or a law graduate, or with the combination of both, it takes some time. But at the end of the day, I must tell you that even if you spend another 1 to 2 years, many people today actually pursue MBAs, but MBAs are generic MBAs as well as specific MBAs. But a professional qualification in a respective domain that you're in, apart from an MBA or apart from your LLB or your attorneys, will actually take you a long way in your career. And I can very vehemently tell you and very confidently tell you that's the success factor that actually brought me into several senior positions in the corporate sector.
Yeah, so so that's a nice, very wide answer. If I may understand, the chartered insurance qualification which you got, there's a reason I'm harping on that. That basically kind of worked into being validated of your being in the insurance industry more than giving you the experience, because you told me more than giving you insight, because you told me that when you were chosen for one thing, one of the people who chose you for that said that you're a lawyer, Joe, you can do this with your experience. So in other words, is it correct for me to say, because we want people who are like you were saying, the youngsters who are listening to watch that, the fact that you have a law degree or attorney at law or both, right, that goes into a automatic acceptance, a validation or a confidence in other places, as long as of course you can perform that. Will it be correct to say that?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct, Chanakya. But there is something that I need to add more to it. Now, I think it's very important that I relate one of the other life experiences that I had. This is something that's actually it will be very useful to lawyers. Particularly the lawyers who are working as legal officers in organizations, or people who are aspiring to become legal officers, or who want to actually join the corporate sector in some respects. Now, when I was apprenticing, I had to undergo my apprenticeship. The organization sponsored me, and the company that I worked sponsored me, and I was referred to Julius and Creasy. Probably you must be remembering Mr. Senathi Raja and Jit Gunaratna. So I was actually working, under in the chambers of Mr. Senathi Raja, a very senior lawyer at that time. And I had to do my articles, my training over there. So while I was doing the corporate, corporate type of opinions and litigations, I was also put in to observe the court practice, and as a apprentice, where I had to go and gain court experience. So one day when I was actually in court, at that time, the mobile phones and things were not available. The communication technology was very poor at that time. I had a message from my managing director requesting me to come and meet him in Mr. Senathi Raja's office at any point in time, because he said until I come, he will remain there. So when I reported to the litigation office, Mr. Jet Gunaratna actually mentioned to me, you're wanted immediately, get into a cab and go to Mr. Senathi Raja's office, which was down Mr. Barunjaya Tilakamavat. So when I went there, one thing my managing director asked, in the presence of the senior partner under whom I was apprenticing, he said, Deepthi, I have made a decision. I actually took you as a management trainee. Now you have gone through the gamut of training, and now you're actually apprenticing and you're training as a lawyer. But I have had I did have a serious disconnect with my legal manager. At that time, there was a senior legal manager in the organization. And he said, I had a serious disconnect on a professional matter with my this person, and that the legal manager opted to move out voluntarily. Not that I asked the person to move out into a different area, but so therefore there is a vacuum over there. So I have decided to take over the legal department. I am a chartered accountant, but I'm not a lawyer. So I need somebody to step in and take over this responsibility. He's asked me, are you prepared to take up the challenge? I said, yes, of course I can take up the challenge. No issue about it. Then he told me, there is something more that I need to tell you. I want a person in that role, not a person who will strike my ideas down, because the lawyers have this tendency to always apply legal theory and always highlight the undoable, right? So I don't want that kind of experience. I want a pleasant working experience with a person to analyze any complex problem and give me a business solution, not to breach the law, but within a framework of law where compliances can be achieved, a solution, right? That's the role that I'm expecting of the person who is in this seat. So then I said, yes, certainly I can do that. That actually changed my mindset as well, because I also had previously I also had this connotations and then theories and ideas where how you can go defensive by applying legal skills and legal theories. But then from that day onwards, because when that message was communicated to me very clearly, I knew what the corporate sector was expecting of a lawyer, right? So basically, the young lawyers and people who are working in the organization should know, right? You should say no to a solution only after you have exhausted all the avenues. And still, if it is a no, yes, you should be able to say no. But that should be done after looking at after going through elimination process and finding out that all the other available solutions are exhausted. So if that is the case, then probably you will obviously have a very good standing and a role in the organization or in the sector that you represent.
So in other words, what you're saying is that had you been a legal officer, we had this chat also on this topic. Had you been a legal officer, now as you know, in most companies or even banks, you have the legal officers, then you go to the legal director, because these are areas youngsters think, dilly-dally on and weighing in their mind whether to go. And then you have this, I don't know if this is relatively new, but the lawyers who are doing compliance, compliance officers. Big companies like Microsoft have their compliance officers, lawyers in different countries. So then you have the legal officers giving opinions. what you are saying is that unless or you get involved in the business per se, the management of the business per se, being in an independent, closed-up department, a law department, will not necessarily give you the proper answer in order to carry out the business. Is that
No, absolutely true. Absolutely true, Chanak.
Okay.
Now it's like this. It's like this. Now,
if I may butt in, if that kind of opinion, now, okay, you're a businessman, right? You're a lawyer, right? You're a businessman.
Yeah.
You know that not all businessmen, but most businesses, they do respect the law. They do respect the law because you have to. But most of the time, they are interested in the sales, the numbers, and making profit. You cannot blame them because a business is not they don't get tax money like a government department. They have to make money and do that. When you are not only looking at the law, right? When you are also, your mind is also what shall I say? My mind is also trained to think as a business person. Isn't it? Or what shall? Will you really be able to give what is record of law in a given situation, or will you be sugarcoating that or couching that with a business solution, more or less?
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. No. Yeah. I think there are few ways that I can answer this question, because I think when I heard you, there is actually a couple of things that I need to mention. Particularly, Chanak, when you get into a work area, right? Most lawyers actually join as trainee legal officers, or they become legal officers, they become senior legal officers, they become board secretaries, secretarial managers, and in that manner they progress. But where actually the disconnect is, no, very few people actually aspire to the senior position in the organization, because you have to really, if you're career oriented, and if you want to go on top of the ladder, you should not actually think that you will end up as the chief legal officer or the board secretary or the senior compliance officer or the senior risk officer. You have to actually aim beyond that. Now, when you aim beyond that, if somebody who is to aim beyond that should not necessarily confine himself or herself into the path of either the legal science, compliances, risk management, or into a defined area. Because I'll give you a classic example. Because when you do your advanced level papers, or if you do your O-level papers, when you have to score the most points, right? After you reach, let's say that if you're answering a question, you very well know, unless it's mathematics, right? If it's something that has to be written, if you attempt a paper, very well you know that you can maximum get is about 80 to 90 marks, right? Maximum. If you're absolutely brilliant, you can get about 80 to 90 marks, or maybe 92 or something to that effect. And if in order for you to score 100, if you waste time, right, then what will obviously happen is that you will lose time on the remaining questions that you got to answer. So once you are aware, when you have self-confidence that you have done very well, and when you actually have reached the climax in that answer, right, you should actually drop that and move into the other area, because once you start up from the ground up level, you actually gain a fairly large amount of marks, and that's actually needed for your aggregation, and maybe to get at the university, or get at the gradings, the overall gradings, or a class that's being required. So similarly, when you apply the same context into the corporate sector, and into work areas, what you need to understand is that when you're actually put into a defined work area, you will probably not be able to be 100%, what you call in normal terms, you call it, a conversant person or a maestro on the subject. You probably will not be able, you can become a maestro on the subject, but you will probably be, not gaining any further experience, because over and over, day by day, you will be experiencing the same thing, right? And then that actually doesn't add any value to the career, because you do it today, or you do it in another 10 years down the line. Obviously, you will be doing the same thing over and over. So what you really need to do is, the message that I want to communicate to the audience is that you have to get the best exposure in all areas that you think will actually, give you a self-sustenance or enrich your knowledge and understanding about how you go about and do a business. So finally, you were asking about sales. I must tell you that when I retired from Eagle Insurance, it was at that time a Zurich company in the sense owned by Zurich Financial Services Group of Switzerland. The position that I held, I was the general manager for distribution. Right, I was general manager for distribution and marketing. Marketing in the sense, marketing is advertising and branding, but distribution involves sales. Right, so my superior at that time told me, however much of a knowledge you have in other areas, finally icing on the cake is actually to learn sales. Right, and I did that job for 2 years. I did that job for 2 years very successfully, and that is the job really, with the operations experience and the sales experience combined together actually molded me as a CEO.
Right. Talking of CEO, you took over as CEO of Orient
Yes.
Insurance, and
Yes.
then Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, you moved on to that.
Yes.
Now, how many years of experience you had before taking over a position like this?
Well, I had 15 years at Eagle Insurance. Then I had 3 years of experience at AIG. So I had 18 years of experience before I actually embarked on the CEO's journey.
Right. Tell me how challenging. What did you feel once you took that job? What did you feel? Now, 15 years is a lot of shorter time, I would say, to become a CEO. That's a very success rate.
It's actually, Chanakya, it's the career ambition, right? It's the career ambition and how you work towards achieving your career ambition. So I told you that when I opted to very firmly settle down in the insurance industry, that was about 3 to 4 years after I started my job at Eagle Insurance, I made a resolution to myself that at the age of 45, I will aim to become the CEO of the largest insurance company in the country. And sharply at 46, I was able to become the CEO of Sri Lanka Insurance, because I must tell you that I worked towards it and I acquired the skill set that was required. And then Orient Insurance, I was before Eagle Insurance was owned by the British American Tobacco as well as Zurich Financial Services Group. But when I went to AIG really molded my character as a CEO, I must tell you, because they trained me, they put me onto a very special training where the country management is being trained. When they actually train a country manager, a country manager can today sit in Sri Lanka or he can sit in any parts of the globe where they have their operations, because it's a unique operation globally. So they actually gave me the training. So the influence that I got from AIG Insurance, it's a Fortune 500 company, and at that time it was the world's biggest insurance company that had an operation here in Sri Lanka. That really molded my career. And so I was very confident that I can take over a CEO's job. So I took up and established the company from the point of taking its license. And I worked for 3 years there because, generally the business forecast, when you do a forecasting in an insurance setup, it actually takes about 3 to 4 years to make, cut your pre-operating expenses, pre-establishment expenses and come to profits. So within 2 years, I was able to give at least 6 million as a CEO. With my team, I was able to give a 6 million profit, and the Dubai shareholders of the Alputame Group was absolutely pleased with the fact that within the second year, the company broke even and got into the profit-making situation. So the other fact that I must also tell you is that from there, this position as CEO of Sri Lanka Insurance was available, and Orient was a startup company, and that was a small company at that time. Its market share out of, I think there were about 18 insurance companies in the market. Right now, you have a segregation of life and general companies separately, so you have a larger number. Smaller number, but at that point there was larger number. So Orient was actually the smallest company, and Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation was actually the second largest company at that point in time. And then I was, I pitched that, and then I was able to Sri Lanka Insurance has so much of assets of the assets that's being owned by the entire insurance industry put together. Sri Lanka Insurance today owns about 60% of the assets. That's how big they are. And including the place that I'm working right now, Lanka Hospitals is owned by Sri Lanka Insurance. So basically, so I was confident that I was able to, despite the fact that I had a good grounding from multinationals, but at the point that I pitched, I was very confident. It was the smallest company at that time, but from the smallest company to manage a very complex operation, which had about 3,000 staff and 10,000 over agents, about 11,000 people, I had the self-confidence. So I think the self-confidence that I acquired throughout my career and the multi-diversification, the skill sets that I acquired was actually helpful for me to face any challenge confidently.
Right. Now, coming back to that legal officer thing, there's this new term. It's not a new term in other countries, but it's creeping into Sri Lankan companies of in-house counsels. I mean, this is for the benefit of our younger people who are watching this. Do you see, I mean, have you come across in your career in Sri Lanka a different category of lawyers working in companies as in-house counsel? And do you see a difference between them and the traditional legal officer category?
Shanaki, it's this way now. Basically, it's the emphasis that's actually being placed by the employer into the legal area. Now, when I work for AIG was, as I said, a Fortune 500 company and #1 insurance company of the world, and including Zurich. Their legal officers were all called counsels. Now, senior counsel, general counsel, and the legal counsel, that's how they were actually classified in their roles. So it was basically tantamount to the role that's being played by a legal officer, but they decorated the position and they empowered the legal officer. The legal officer was actually, more or less also given opportunities because, when you work with multinationals, they are very strict on employment numbers. They work with the least number of people. So they to the general counsel or the legal counsel, you entrust various responsibilities apart from your legal duties.
Now, recently you talk of Fortune 500. There's this legal 500 thing in US where there's 500 best law firms. There's some research done in that, and they said for in-house counsel, that is for a person who should give the advice like you said you managed to give as a lawyer and a business person. For that purposes, a lawyer migrating from a law firm or a private practice is not very good because this may come as a shock to people. This is in the American landscape of lawyering because they are too rigid. The person who has to be in an in-house counsel or advising inside the company has to be groomed within. Do you agree with this statement?
Well, yeah, to a great extent, because now when you hire a lawyer, the law you're expected to have your generic knowledge about the law and the legal science. But when you're actually put in as a counsel in that organization, in order for him to be very successful, to be a successful employee in that organization, he needs to know many aspects of that organization. So therefore, the grooming is really needed about the corporate culture, how they work, what their markets, how they should behave, what the competitive and anti-competitive practices, antitrust laws which are available in the market. All that is actually very unique. So therefore, I think these lawyers will be trained, particularly with it's actually when you were particularly speaking about the US companies. Now, for instance, having worked for AIG, I know it's not only the Sri Lankan laws that you are expected to comply, because you are expected to comply with the US laws as well. Right. And sometimes the European Union, when sanctions and things are in place, you are expected to know everything. So therefore, as a legal officer in Sri Lanka, you may necessarily know what's actually unique to Sri Lanka. But the group policies, how you need to adhere to the group policies, how you can steer the organization to comply with the global policies and the standards. Because if any other territories, now if you take a multinational organization, if any other entities across the globe commits a breach of what you call laws or regulations that's available, the directors in the US also can become liable under the laws of the US, for breaching compliance or negligent supervision or into some offense. So basically, it's in their it's in the importance of the entire group that they will have to train the local lawyers also with the group policies and the group governance standards. So that's my response to that, Chanakya.
Right. Now, so for a lawyer, again, I'm just recapping to get this straight. For a lawyer who wants to be in a company, it does not necessarily have to go and take a big chambers experience or big law firms experience, and that cannot be considered an advantage, as opposed to you're coming as maybe a quite fresh person, maybe 1 year doing something or soon after graduating, straight directly to the corporate sector. Which is more advantageous to go up in the ladder?
Well, I think, Shanak, there are two things. One is the academic background that you have gained.
Yeah, yes.
So when in any court of law today, you see the theories are being argued, right? There is a theory and there is a practical approach. Now, most importantly, I think the theoretical aspect, if you have been very sound in understanding the legal aspect, the legal principles while you were in the law school, that actually gives you a greater understanding of a solid, firm foundation. But if you have not paid much attention, if you have only paid attention to the passing of the exams, then that experience is gained while you're working, right? In the chambers of a senior counsel or in the chambers of a law firm or something like that. So it's your unique position that actually, gives the answer to the question that you asked. So I would say in any respect, while you have the let's say you assume a person who has got a good understanding of the legal science, right? You have a good understanding of the legal principles, but it's also important that you need to understand as to how the system works. So therefore, a person with the experience in a law firm or in the chambers, maybe 1 years or 2 years of experience, because I think 2 years, if you serve for 2 years, you're not going to get back to the corporate sector, because many people will probably find their own way in the legal profession. But maybe if you have 1 year of experience, probably that's adequate enough for you to start up a career in the corporate sector. But that too, I must tell you that it has to be with where you can actually get a fairly a better understanding as to how the system works. Now, in my case, perhaps now, I said that I was actually, while I was a management trainee, I got a dual role of apprenticing in the chambers of two senior lawyers. That's Mr. Jet Gunaratne at that time and Mr. Senati Raja. So that experience I gained because, I think I was very fortunate and lucky enough. So while I was actually going through my management trainee program, I also had to do the apprenticing, a fully paid, apprentice job. I was able to. So that's that's a unique advantage that I had, but I know very many people will not have that advantage. But if you have a good exposure into a law firm or into the chambers of a senior lawyer, that will also help them to actually establish in the corporate sector in a better fashion, in a better way.
Okay, all this time we're talking about insurance experience you had. Now you migrated from insurance to handling health service management, if I may use that term, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
Law background, insurance background, now you're managing health services, one of the biggest hospitals in Sri Lanka, Lanka hospitals. When you take a shift like that, how was the experience?
Actually speaking, I had to retire from H&B Assurance at the age of 55.
Yeah.
Because, my retirement was, in the company was at the age of 55. And then, so I opted out from the insurance industry at 55. So about 6 months, because when you're a CEO, when you hold a senior position, it's sometimes difficult for you to get a equivalent replacement or go in there because, these positions are occupied and very rarely people move away from the positions. Some people may, make some arrangements with the directors, get their blessings and then get them extended and all that. But I was not that. I was a person who really believed in performance, which I did in my career. And so I opted out. I opted out of the company, and then this position was available. So when I applied on the first occasion, I was actually not the first choice. I was shortlisted. Right? It was actually during the period where the pandemic actually set in. This was in March. We had the pandemic in 2020 March. We had the country being closed, and sometime in June, when I was about to retire in July, the interviews were held. And in the first round, I was shortlisted, but then I went in for the final interview, and the position was available. Position was actually offered to a doctor, And so the hospital informed me saying that, somebody else has been chosen, but you were a very close candidate. So therefore, we regret, but we need to communicate this message to you. I said, that's all right, certainly all right, because, you pitch for a job, you may get a job or you may not get a job. And thereafter, maybe about 2 weeks later, I was again contacted and I was told that the person to whom the job has been offered had one moment.
Yeah, I think we lost your video.
Yeah. I got it.
Okay. You're back.
Yeah. So what happened was they told me that this job, the doctor has actually, not taken the position, but are you able to take on the position? I said, yeah, certainly, all right. So when I walked into Lanka hospitals and when I walked into the medical field, I had no clue. I had no idea. I had only two things in me. That was self-confidence. Second thing was the management skill, right? So with this, within 1 year, I must very proudly tell you that I have acquired a fair understanding of the way that a hospital is being run. And the hospital, from where it was, has been brought into greater heights today. Right, I can't divulge the numbers, but in a couple of months, when the numbers are out, you will know the numbers, because since it's a listed company in the Colombo Stock Exchange, I can't divulge the numbers. But it's a truly amazing experience, and I have very successfully applied my management theories. That was the self-confidence that actually gave me the ability to apply my management skills into the medical administration area. Because when you go in as a CEO, you're not going to actually treat people. You have to administer the whole setup, right? So the place that I'm in at the moment is far different from the financial services industry. This is actually like, it's like a manufacturing concern. It's like a hotel. It's like the hospital. It has whole gamut of operations, like the engineering to food and beverage to everything you have, the medical supplies, all that. So I have been able to very successfully maneuver the company, and not only to maneuver the company, but maneuver the company to great success, right? So that's my take on it. Yeah.
Now, as you're a lawyer, I'll briefly ask you about this. The short question would be, are you happy about the health law in Sri Lanka? Special focus on the fact of patients' rights. Now, we know we would say patients have rights because the government is giving free hospitals, the NHS equal to what you would have in England and Canada and Australia and all that. But are you happy with, if I may narrow it down to patients' rights law in Sri Lanka? Now, let me give you an example. Now, in most countries, if you walk into private hospitals, in an ER, there is no question of, even if you're a foreigner, I was told, even if you're a foreigner in Germany and France, you can walk in anywhere, you get the treatment. You don't have to make an initial deposit, right? We don't have, correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have that in private hospitals in Sri Lanka. Initial itself, even if you go with a heart attack to ER, they will want you to deposit something, and as you go on, you will do something. But this does not happen. I have relatives who have had this personal experience in other countries. What do you say for that kind of right? Should not people have that kind of a right, and should not the private sector hospitals fall in line with the rest of the world's methodology?
Shanaki, I can actually answer the question this way. Now, I represent both industries. One is actually I have a fairly extensive experience in the insurance industry. Then I actually have the 2-year experience in the healthcare industry. Now, if you look at the countries that we are speaking of, the Western countries, right, particularly when we relate our experience to the Western context, in the West, predominantly 90% of the population is insured. And there are compulsory insurances. And sometimes I don't think in certain countries the governments pay, but some countries the governments doesn't pay. But after all, if you want to be treated, you have to be registered with a general practitioner, and you have to have your underlying insurance arrangement. So it's only then that you are able to actually walk into a hospital and offer the what you call the medical card or the identity that you have, and then the hospital will treat you. But in today's context in Sri Lanka, the prevalence of insurance is about probably I would say about 15% of the population if you take the medical insurances together. So it's about 15% of the population. So therefore,
isn't it simply because, if I may interrupt, isn't it simply because the premiums are very high for an ordinary person to accept this?
No, I wouldn't say so, because the thing that I see is we don't get standalone medical insurances offered to the general public. What I see is that the medical insurances is there are two types of medical insurances. One is if you're working in a corporate company, then the company will actually provide you with the insurance arrangements, a direct insurance. But the normal population that we are speaking of, their insurances are mainly coupled with a life insurance element. So therefore, the insurance premium is expensive. But if you have a standalone medical insurance for individuals in this country, then the critical mass can be attracted. And then the critical mass, because the insurance actually works on law of large numbers, when the numbers are large, then the premium factor can go down. So therefore, there is this disconnect between the corporate insurances being offered to the to their employees, and also the life insurance coupled with medical insurance being sold to the ordinary citizens. And the number doesn't represent more than 15 to 18% of the population. So therefore, the number is very small. So if we talk about patients' rights, right, in the manner that you represented, if there is no underlying insurance or underlying protection, then obviously the hospitals are facing a default risk. Because if somebody says, somebody comes and somebody, wants to be treated in the hospital, and finally when the person says that he cannot pay the bill, you can't actually detain the person. What can you do? You have to go on a civil suit today, in that case, for recovery, right? And sometimes I know I have about 22 such cases. When you look at the people who have signed up the guarantee, their whereabouts cannot even be traced, really speaking. So the cost of recovering is very high. And then at the same time, I must also tell you that in the hospital administration, sometimes you see the bills maybe at a very high level, but parts of the bills are actually the consultant's fee and the fees that the hospital incurs to purchase the consumables and the reagents. So therefore, there's an absolute cost factor. And I can tell you that in many hospitals, this must be the GP ratio is about 40 to 40%. So within that 40%, you have to manage all of the expenses in the hospital, right? The gross profit margin is about 40%. So with a gross profit margin of about 40%, you can't actually take any chances and run the risk of not being able to, not being able to of being able to admit patients without deposits and things like that. So where there are insurances, yes, the hospitals do take deposits, but when there isn't insurance, then obviously you will need to have a deposit or some financial arrangement for you to be admitted. But otherwise, the hospital will face a severe default risk. And that's
this is a discussion this is subject to discussion we should have on a different platform and a forum. Although I brought it up because it'll go against. Anyway, for recapturing all what we spoke in the last 50 minutes, for our young attorneys who are looking at you, if you were to recap all these things together, what is the advice you're going to give to people I would say categories like this: people who have just passed out, right, who would be watching this video now or later, people who are, in about as you might have not experienced if you're not a practicing lawyer from this thing, 3-4 years or 4-5 years in a chamber or a law firm, you're still dabbling as to what you should do. And then people who are just doing the finals and thinking of what they should do. I'm just hypothetically making 3 categories. These type of people, what is your advice to do what is your advice with regard to not only your 2 sectors, overall getting in the business sector? How should they navigate themselves should have a life, what shall I say, career beyond court practice?
Well, I would put it this way. Now, as the targeted audience that we are speaking of, right, either the law students or the up and coming lawyers, or the young people, you need to do what you like in life, right? That's number one. So if you shift your focus if you shift your career ambition from A to B, there will be a point at which you will regret. So importantly, my message to the audience is that you need to do what you like in life. But I can tell you very confidently, corporate sector offers you a very wide opportunity for you to excel. In order for you to excel, you need to have a skill set. And then you need to have a thorough understanding of the area that you represent. And the third thing is that you need to have self-confidence. Self-confidence is a combination of many things, right? If you are confident enough that if you are confident that you can do this particular task, or if you can engage in this task and accomplish it to success, that's the level of confidence. Because sometimes there are instances where sometimes when a complex issue is presented, when I start a letter, I don't know where I'm going to end the letter, but finally when the end comes, it's a very successful conclusion, right? So it's your skill and judgment, right? It's your maturity and it's your confidence level that brings the end result. So therefore, my message to everybody is that you need to acquire the skill set, be knowledgeable about the industry, and then finally have your self-confidence level. So if you are in that, then in whatever the field that you're in, you can be a very successful person.
Yeah. So I remember when I passed out, one of my teachers, famous senior attorney, he was one of our teachers, and he was telling me, us in the apprenticeship year, I very well remember, now is the time for you to do other courses, right? Because we are not decided whether you're going to practice. I was lucky into getting into a good job as a counsel, but not everybody. So other than what you said, soon after you come out, do you think they should, even if they don't have a vague guide, I mean, okay, I'll be in the insurance field, I'll be in the health management, because health management is a big thing now. Should they do other courses as well, other than law?
No, I will put it this way. I will put it this way. You need to first choose the area where you're going to be, right? And then you need to acquire other qualifications. I can speak of a batchmate of mine today.
Correct.
He was a law graduate. He and I were in the same batch. While he was working, he did chartered accountancy, because he never wanted to come and practice in the corporate area, but he knew that he was in the legal profession, but he knew that he was going to be in the corporate sector. So he was just a clerk in a insurance, not insurance, is a finance company. And he rarely used to visit the university, but he used to get the lectures and his studies. And then finally, by the time that he completed his LLB, he was halfway through his chartered. And finally, I think he's the best man I would say in my whole batch. He's the regional finance controller for Dart Express Group, and he's now based in Australia. And he employs so much of Sri Lankans, right? So that's the pinnacle of success, I must tell you. So he knew at the very big onset, he knew that he was never going to come into the legal practice. So, but he gained experience. He gained experience in the finance company. He got his finance qualifications, the chartered accountancy. He got his LLB. He did his attorneys, and finally he was the financial controller here for the Dart Express Group. But then when he opted to migrate, he was actually offered this position, and for the entire Asia Pac region, he's the financial controller. So that's the kind of additional qualifications that you need to aspire and obtain, because after you know where you're going to be, right, where you're going to be in, because otherwise it's like shooting in the dark. Now, for instance, immediately after you pass out as a graduate, or if you pass out as an attorney, if you do the banking qualifications, banking exams, and if you don't get into a bank, then okay, you will have some understanding as a practitioner as to how it happens in the banking industry. But it really adds a very limited value on you, right? But once you choose your industry, you can decide the qualification, the additional qualification, or the best qualification that you need to acquire.
Recently, I was listening to one of the foremost law professors, and he, in fact, reiterated that position in a previous speech as well. There was a research done with regard to the insurgency, which you mentioned in the beginning of the speech in 2088, 89. This insurgency came up with young people, university students, as you know,
yes,
whatever the party. So there was a commission that was done afterwards as to I think a presidential commission report or whatever, as to why did these youngsters who are in universities did go into just island-wide research. And one of the things this professor told us in the speech is that what they discovered in that is the students who came forward and youngsters, now these are not lawyers but others, said we don't have role models that we should follow, so we are kind of lost other than the academic course. As an attorney, now that was a whole gamut of all types of people, all walks of life and all courses in all universities that is coming out of graduation. But as lawyers, when you come out, other than the two things you basically said, having qualifications on the area that you like and focus to do, as well as having your self-confidence and your focus, is it necessary for somebody to follow a role model, or will following a role model not really bring out of you who you are?
No, obviously you need to have a role model. I totally agree with the conclusion. Yeah. He may not be your mentor, but you can be his follower, right? You can follow him, really speaking, because not his follower, you can follow him. You have to have an inspirational person upon which you look up to, right? If you look up to an inspirational person, then obviously, you're characterizing, you're shaping your character in order to be a person of that level, at a later point in time when you settle in life. Even in the corporate sector, it's always good for you to have a mentor. A mentoring is very important once you actually once you settle and once you decide to embark on a career, and not at the very beginning, I must tell you. When you get stabilized, when you get mature, in order to overcome some of the weaknesses that you have, it's always better for you to have a role model. Not a role model in the corporate sector, you call it a mentor, but when you're a graduate, you can actually have an inspirational leader as your role model. I must tell you, I can very openly tell you, around that time when I was in the university, it was the era of President J.R. Jayawardena. But President J.R. Jayawardena, irrespective of the political opinions, political differences people had on President J.R. Jayawardena, if you look at his profile, if you look at the way that he conducts himself, right, the way that he speaks, he was actually a role model for a lawyer at that time, right? He was so impressive when he speaks, when it comes to audience. He doesn't, he talks to the point. He knows what he's talking. He knows how to respond to the media. He knows how to answer a press conference. So obviously speaking, not politics, leaving politics apart, he was a person who could have been, obviously been selected by people as a role model at that time. But then the point is that there were people who chose him. There were people who chose the other people, that led to paths of destruction. So it was total anarchy around that time. But for personal development, I must tell you, having a role model is the best.
Deepthi Lukwarachi, attorney, chartered insurer, and so much of in your CV. We have no time to go through on that. And current CEO of the Lanka Hospital Group. Thank you very much for joining us today on this in this very first inaugural program of the web series, continuing web series of the Bar Association. The web series, if you have joined us, is called Beyond Court Practice. And our first guest, like I said, was Deepthi Lukwarachi. Once again, thanks a lot. And thanks for insightful thoughts and navigating them towards as an advice to the young people. And we wish you success and luck in everything you do. And do join us probably some other time in one of these programs. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Anna.
And this is just the first one, 153rd episode of the webinar series of the Bar Association Sri Lanka. I'll be back with you on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we're going to talk to another inspiring person from a different walk of life. But just like Deepthi, she also has started with a law graduate, but never did any practice or anything, but she's chosen her field and has excelled. We'll be joined on Tuesday with Varuni Amunugama, the CEO of Triads, and also one of the co-founders of TV Derana and the Derana Network, one of the premier TV channels in Sri Lanka. And we will talk to her of her walk of life and what she could share with us in order to guide our future young lawyers on this webinar series, Beyond Court Practice. Join me on Tuesday at 7 o'clock for that on this continuing series. Thank you for joining us. Good night.